We're going to talk to Adam, who's calling in from Illinois. Adam, what's going on?
Hello, how are you?
Hello, Adam. Welcome to Truth Wanted.
I actually called in the atheist experience. When was that? Monday?
Oh, on Sunday, right? When I was on. Yeah. That's right, folks. Some of you guys are new to Truth Wanted. Welcome to the show. You guys probably saw me on Atheist Experience. So if you are listening because of that, hey, welcome. This is the other one of the other many awesome productions the ACA does. I'm hoping I can be back on AXB sometime. We'll see. But yeah, it was a great experience. I recommend you guys check it out. It was a cool episode. So anyways, yes, Adam, welcome to Truth Wanted.
Yes, thank you. My question. So when I was on the atheist experience, I was going to ask why to give a logical reason to be an atheist, and he said something that a God hasn't proved a claim, and so that's why he doesn't believe in God. And it threw me off because an atheist is not someone who disbelieves in. An atheist is not someone that doesn't believe in God. An atheist is someone that says no God exists, like God does not exist.
I don't know. I don't know if I would agree with that. I mean, like, atheism as a term is pretty broad. I think it's fair to say that people can interpret it in different ways. I wouldn't even agree that there's one particular way that the word atheist has to be described. I think it might be fair to say, like, the broadest way is to say that there is an absence of belief. But that may mean disbelief. That may mean active rejection, but it may also mean, a belief that was never there in the first place. I think it's fair, but people have talked about the definitions and meanings of these words. I'm kind of more of a person that says, well, like, you define it however you want, as long as you're super clear up front when you talk about it. It really doesn't matter to me. I don't know, Reid, do you have a similar take? Or
yeah, this is why the confidence scale helps a lot in SE conversations. It's like, maybe you're around 50% that a God exists, could not, or we're like 100% sure it does exist, or, 0% or 1%. You can kind of get a feel for that person's, confidence about whatever claim. And God is one of the claims that you can put on a confidence scale.
Yeah, and actually for myself, and I have this on my Twitter, I've actually really experimented with the word atheist, which, in the technical sense just means that the idea or question of the existence of God is meaningless because the word God doesn't have an unambiguous or completely coherent definition. Basically, anytime you talk to somebody about God, they can mean all kinds of things. They could mean the Christian God. They could mean something else. They could mean the universe. They could mean all of existence. And until we can define what God means, I can't actually profess a belief or disbelief or whatever, because I don't know exactly what we're talking about. It's one of the most unclear words out there. So atheist is kind of a label I've been using recently. And it's one of those words where you kind of have to explain it the first time. But it avoids the semantic discussions that happen with talking about the word atheist. And I worry that when I describe myself as an atheist to someone who may not be familiar with these kind of discussions, that they may get an impression of my beliefs or lack thereof that isn't actually true to my experience, right? So that's kind of my take on that. Anyway, Adam, we've been talking for a bit. I don't know if we've been helpful here for you.
Yeah, I disagree with your definition of atheist and this God thing. Well, one topic at a time. The atheist, if you just Google what an atheist, it says a person who disbelieves or lacks belief in the existence of God or gods. Okay,
and again, I would counter that you could Google a different definition of atheist as well. I don't think that it's mutually exclusive. But again, like, let's say you do have this one particular definition of atheism and somebody else has a different definition that's, slightly different. What is the, why does that matter right now? I mean, I understand if we're making a philosophy paper, we want to get our terms right. But like, if somebody else is using a different definition, is it that big of a deal?
Well, it depends. If you are an atheist, but you're really just an agnostic. You don't believe in God, but you don't not believe in God. If you're just agnostic, then there's really the burden of proof is not on you because you're not really making a claim. But now claiming that God does not exist, like if you're claiming that, then that is a positive claim, and the burden of proof would be on you at that point.
Okay, I think that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, like that's a good point. If somebody is actively claiming that a God does not exist, then yeah, suddenly that conversation takes a different tone, right? Because if you're saying, "Oh, I just don't have a belief," or that thought never really crossed my mind, even then you're not really making a claim as to the existence of God. But if you're actively saying, "No, this God does not exist," yeah, that's a caliber of a different kind of conversation. Yeah, totally. I agree with you there. Do you think that an atheist has to demonstrate that a God doesn't exist in order for them to be valid as an atheist? Or do you take a different stance?
Well, I think if you claim to be an atheist, that you should actually have the burden of proof should be on you to show that the God doesn't exist or God can exist. But if you're not an atheist, if you're just an agnostic, then okay, fine, you're not an agnostic. But I think the reason why agnostics claim to be atheists is just because atheism is more what's the word? It's more like powerful, it's more offensive, it's more direct, it's more firm. Whereas agnostic is just kind of like, well, I don't know. Whereas atheist is like affirmative.
Yeah, there is a political connotation to the word atheist that agnostic may not have, for sure, especially like in a popular culture sense. So yeah, I'd agree with you in that sense. But I don't know if somebody who is an atheist necessarily has the burden of proof to say that they have to prove there isn't God, because I don't think all atheists even go that far. I think someone can be an atheist or can call themselves an atheist and not have to say that for sure that God does not exist. I don't think that that's something that an atheist has to do. But I don't know, Reid, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think what he's trying to talk about the burden of proof, and wherever a claim is, when someone brings you a claim, if you're just agnostic about it, and if you claim that it exists or doesn't exist, then you have a burden of proof. But people who are agnostic, not sure either way, those are the people who don't have a burden of proof. I think that's what I'm hearing him say is how the burden of proof works.
Yeah, I think that's my understanding as well.
And I'm not sure that's how the burden of proof works. Like, Russell's teapot is like a classic thought experiment that, there's a teapot, in between the orbit of, Earth and Jupiter or wherever, somewhere in space. That, is it, are agnostics the only people who don't have a burden of proof? Like people who are 50% on that claim, like it's either true or not true, and they're just not sure if it is or not. And if they're just agnostic about it, they don't have to prove anything. They could be 50% about it. I would claim 50% is a very high degree of confidence for that claim about a teapot in between, Earth and Jupiter out there. So it's like, I would say it's virtually certain there is not a teapot out in space right now. So I think it's like based upon the background knowledge consensus of our human knowledge in general is where the burden of proof starts. And that is something also called the null hypothesis. So like, it's just that teapot does not exist. That's the null hypothesis for teapots out in space. So if you want to try to overcome that null hypothesis, and you'll just have to provide reasons and evidence, and we can totally revise our confidence about that claim. But it's like, I don't think 50% is the default for every claim. So that, the burden of proof relates to. That's how I think about it.
Interesting. Adam, what do you think?
You can't be an agnostic about everything. Agnostic is belief. If you Google agnostic, it's loading. If you Google agnostic, it says a person who believes nothing can be known about the existence or nature of God or anything beyond material phenomenon. But then it says a person who claims neither faith nor disbelief in God. Now, I agree with that. I don't agree with the other part of it, because I think that actually would be a positive claim, that you cannot know the nature or existence of God. I think that's an actual claim. But a person,
Yeah, I'd say you're right, actually.
neither
Yeah.
faith,
I'll keep going.
yeah, but a person who claims, oh, sorry, a person who claims neither faith nor disbelief in God, like that's not like, prove that you don't believe in God. It's like, well, I don't. That's like that's not really a positive claim, and so you can't be an agnostic about everything. It's not like you're an agnostic about the teapot there. If you're claiming there's a teapot in space, then the burden of proof would be on you.
Sure.
And if you're saying the teapot is not there, even though you're making a claim, I still think the burden of proof would be on the other person because they're saying it is there.
Yeah.
Because
Good.
because you can actually, you can trip people up with the burden of proof. Because if I tell you that watermelons are blue on the inside until you cut the skin, prove I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If I say that, I can keep you busy for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you agree with us then, Adam, and how we're using the words.
Well, what am I agreeing with?
If the person who posits that there's a teapot out in space has the burden of proof, and a person who posits a God exists has the burden of proof, are those is that a fair analogy?
Well, because I think the teapot is kind of an arbitrary one that you just kind of throw out there, and whereas God is a lot more significant. And if there was no God, it would mean a whole lot. And if there was a God,
isn't the significance that you're attributing to it also arbitrary?
I don't think so.
Well,
Because
there's a lot of people where the
God.
question of God really doesn't mean anything to them. In the West, it's something that we've talked about a lot, but like a lot of Eastern philosophies really aren't interested in answering the question of God. I think this might be a cultural thing that we might have an interest in it. And so I think the idea that one has more significance over the other, and therefore its arbitrariness determines the burden of proof, I don't necessarily agree with that.
Well, if I say my God told me to kill everyone, like you would kind of, that wouldn't be like an acceptable, like you can't just let him go. That's fine.
Sure. That's important.
Like a big deal.
That's an important topic. It's an important time to talk about it. But the burden of proof thing that we're talking about here, right? Like, Reid and I would probably say, and I don't read Reid's mind, but I think he would say, yeah, like that person is unreasonable in their actions because their logic for doing so isn't valid. It's based on a faulty premise, that being that a God is talking to them, which is something that we wouldn't believe is true. Now, again, we're not going to be able to be in that person's head, and we can't say exactly with 100% philosophical certainty that God isn't talking to them, but there is going to be a level of evidence that we would need to be convinced of that. So
well, yeah, I would 100% tell you that God has not told him to do that. If you're just going around killing innocent people, I actually know God, and he did not tell you to do that. But I know you won't believe that. But
yeah, I definitely don't. You're right about that. Are you being serious right now? Are you saying you do believe that you can talk to God?
No, I believe the Bible. If you said that God told you to do something, but the thing he told you to do contradict the Bible, then I would know that God didn't tell you to do that.
Reid, I want you to take this conversation from here. I'm curious what you would do.
Well, what I'm hearing him say is that he has a knowledge claim that a God exists, and I'd love to understand what his main reasons why for believing whatever this God is. I assume, the Christian God. Is that right?
Yeah, of course.
Cool. What would you say is your main reason why you believe in this Christian God?
To quickly, the intelligent design argument and the moral argument.
Okay.
Will just get you that'll just prove God. It won't get you to the Christian God though, but it will show that the universe can exist without God. And then once you realize there is a God, then I guess you just Technically, it's something you'd have to study and search out yourself. But if you were going to start searching, I think your best bet is to start with the Bible and Jesus Christ, because Jesus Christ is the most famous and influential person ever in human history. And Christianity is the largest religion, and the Bible is the most famous, most popular book in the world. So if you were going to start somewhere, I would start there.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is, go ahead.
Oh yeah, what were you going to say?
I just want to repeat back what I'm hearing you say. What I'm hearing you say is one of the main reasons why that gets you to a God in general is the intelligent design argument, and also the moral argument, and for specific theism for Christianity, it's the Bible and Jesus being the most popular person in history.
That's just a start.
Hypothetically,
like if you were seriously,
can I
if
just
you were
ask?
Seriously,
hypothetically, if we went through and researched these arguments about intelligent design and moral argument, and we say a year from now came to believe that these arguments are not reasonable to believe are good arguments to come to a belief in a God, and you also came to that position, do you think that would have any effect on your confidence that a God exists if you no longer felt those reasons were for good reasons?
well, yeah, if you can refute the intelligence design argument, that argument's actually in Romans 1. It's actually in the Bible. And that argument is actually really important, because when God is going to judge everyone, even including people who've not heard the gospel, even people that have not heard of Jesus, and some people will be like, well, how is that fair? Is God going to judge people who have not heard? And this is where the moral argument, or the moral argument, which is that God wrote his law on our hearts, so we are without excuse when we basically violate, treat others the way you would like to be treated, to love thy neighbor as thyself. When you violate that, it doesn't matter where you come from or where you are in the world, you knew better and you did it anyway. And the intelligent design argument is, you can clearly see that the whole universe must have had a creator, because of the whole you couldn't get a book to make itself by chance. You couldn't get a building to make itself by chance. You never, that could happen ever.
If hypothetically, to your own satisfaction, you found an alternate explanation that had nothing to do with a God for the origin of the universe, hypothetically, if you can imagine that yourself believing that, would that have any effect on your confidence about a God?
I want to say yes, but I also happen to know that there is none. Like, it's impossible for there to not be a God. It's impossible. Like, the intelligent design argument and the moral argument, I've not heard anyone refute them. I've heard of the puddle. I've heard of the beaver dam, which is what Matt told me Sunday.
Right.
And I've heard of the snowflake. Because, the snowflake, if you look at it under a microscope, it looks intricately designed, but it's technically not. It's technically just one single pattern that just repeats itself, so it's not really intelligent design. Do you know about the puddle one?
Yeah, the puddle analogy.
We are the puddle.
Right.
Yeah,
right. So, a puddle looks at, basically, for anyone who isn't familiar with it, a puddle in this scenario would be sentient and is looking at itself and it's saying, wow, I was created exactly to fill this hole, which is like, well, water is going to take up space no matter where it goes. So it's not actually designed in that sense. But go ahead, Reid. I want you to let's try to finish up this conversation.
Yeah. So let's say a Hindu hypothetically comes on our little call here as well, and he also has the same arguments for a God, like the intelligent design argument and moral argument. And we're all listening to this Hindu. How could we tell between you and this Hindu, if you're both using these reasons for coming to belief in a God? If he's coming to that belief with those reasons, and you're coming to that belief with those same reasons, how could someone on the outside tell which one is more accurate about their beliefs?
Well, because you guys want to finish up, and I don't want to keep you guys too long, but one step at a time. Once we can establish there has to be a God, then the next step is to find out which one, and then there's other questions that go along with that. But can we get to square one, which is there has to be a God, there has to be a creator? the universe couldn't make itself. We don't have more, like animals don't have morality. They don't have justice. They don't care about government. They don't have like concepts of good and evil. They don't pray. We do all those things. Like, we're not animals.
I have a lot I want to say about this conversation, but what we are trying to do here is demonstrate what an SE conversation would look like. And what Reid has been doing has been asking questions, a lot of it hypotheticals, and not actually have been responses to a lot of the claims that Adam, that you've been making. So next time you call in, Adam, I want to have a discussion about the moral arguments and the intelligent design category of arguments. And we can get into the nitty gritty for there. For now, I think this was a good demonstration in what a good SE conversation looks like. So I'm going to let you go for now, but next time I invite you to talk about this again, and maybe we can have a different approach to this conversation so that we can maybe give more responses with our personal opinions on the matter rather than just doing a question and answer session. So hopefully that sounds good to you, Adam. I'm going to let you go now, but thank you so much for calling in. And yeah, next time we can get to it and see what we can do differently. So again, that was an SE conversation. We could have done a bit more with that SE call.
Yeah, but usually, take more time to, get their confidence and build more rapport and, get more of what he believes and more reasons out on the table. Yeah, but, we're restricted here.
We started the conversation off differently, and then I saw where this was going. So I was like, oh, well, Reid should just do an SE thing here. And this was good because, again, this wasn't a process of argument versus counter argument in this particular instance. Although I really want to chime in and say things here and there, and I'm sure you did too. But that's not what the street epistemology method is, which is frustrating but also useful because we were able to evaluate whether or not the claims he was making to his arguments as to his belief were really what was holding his belief up rather than something else, right? You were asking questions about, well, if this was different, would your belief change? Or if this was not found to be true, would your belief change? Which is an advantage to the method because sometimes people say things that support their beliefs, but that they don't actually support their beliefs, because you can find, you can take that away. And that doesn't actually change their beliefs at all. They're just kind of making, an extra argument for their case, right?
Yeah, you can spend all day talking about, the vast, litany of, these theological arguments and philosophical arguments. But if they're not really connected to their confidence, and then you don't really need to spend too much time on them. You can just find a real reason that they, say is connected to their confidence that would revise their confidence if they no longer had that reason or found it to be not good.
Yes. So we could talk so much more about that, but a quick takeaway, of course, is, again, Reid and I feel very differently than Adam about a lot of these questions, right? Like, I definitely don't think you need we need to start with God first and then figure out the other stuff, or that a God is required for seeing the universe or for morality. But it's not about, in this context, what we're thinking. We're trying to evaluate and really see what this belief is about. And so I'm glad we had that little test run of kind of an SE conversation. That's a little taste, little something for you to chew on there.